When a young woman receives a birthday gift of a doll from her mother, she is first elated, believing it to make a wonderful companion. But when the doll begins to move on its own, it soon reveals its malevolent nature. It will take the expertise of renowned demonologists and priests to help free them from the entity that now infests their lives. Will they make it out alive before it's too late? This is the untold story of Annabelle, the demonic doll of Connecticut. And this story just may make you think twice about your keepsakes. Our story begins in 1970. 25-year-old Deirdre Bernard has recently moved into her first apartment with her two friends, an engaged couple named Lara Clifton and Cal Randell. Her mother had bought her a gift for her birthday and hoped that it would keep her daughter's spirits up and spread joy to her new home as she pursued her education and nursing. Deirdre loved the gift, finding its rosy red cheeks with hair to match to be a fun companion for her new journey in life. Shortly after admiring her new doll, she placed it on her bed with its arms and legs out. For the next several days, it became routine for Deirdre to come home from her studies, spend time with the doll, and then place her back in the exact same position with its arms and legs out on her bed. Oddly, however, after the first several days of this new routine, the young woman began to notice that something wasn't quite right. Every morning, she would lay her doll back on her bed before heading to school with its arms and legs stretched out. Yet every night upon her return, she would find the doll in different positions. Sometimes, the doll's legs would be crossed, and other times, its arms. And as the days went on, it would even start to be seen in different parts of her room, oftentimes with its arms pointed outward. But Deirdre's room would not be its only occupied space. The doll would begin to be found in various positions all over the apartment, and Deirdre wasn't the only person who was witnessing these bizarre manifestations. Her two roommates would seem to bear witness to them as well. One evening, Deirdre returned home with her roommate, Lara, who was also a trainee nurse at the time, and her fiancé, Cal. Upon opening the door to their apartment, they would find the doll kneeling before them, in a chair, facing the door, as if it had been waiting for them to return. This not only scared everyone, but especially Deirdre, because she knew for a fact that as per her routine, that she had placed the doll on her bed that very morning. It had inexplicably moved on its own. To try and make sense of all this, they moved the doll and then tried to reposition it back into its original kneeling stance, the same one they had seen when initially walking through the door. But each time they tried to replicate the position, due to the design of the doll, this proved impossible. The movement of the doll, as well as its position now, left the trio at a loss for words. The only conclusion they could draw from the situation was that some kind of force was manipulating the doll. Deirdre would place the doll back in its normal position on her bed for the night, but this experience would be far from the last for all of them. Just several days following the previously mentioned happening, a new phenomenon began to manifest. Little notes, written in pencil on parchment paper, began to be found randomly throughout the apartment. And at random times, the messages included such phrases as "help us" or "help Cal." But despite the messages' urgent requests for help, no one was able to figure out just what they were referring to, because none of them were experiencing an urgent situation, including Cal. And weirder still, none of them kept parchment paper or pencils. This realization just further deepened the mystery that was now unfolding before their very eyes. At first, they believed that possibly someone was breaking into their apartment to play pranks on them. So in order to check if this indeed was the case, Deirdre and Lara began leaving marks around the windows and doors. Marks that, if disturbed, would show later on. They also rearranged their furniture in an effort to ensure that if anyone was entering their apartment unannounced, that they would leave a trace. But again, later that night, upon their return from their studies, none of the furniture had been disturbed, nor had any of their marks. Yet the doll had moved rooms. Frightened and perplexed at this point, the trio tried to come up with some potential solutions. But as they individually gave them thought, day in and day out, the doll would continue to move on its own accord, positions and places. One day, the three would return yet again, as per their routine, to find the doll yet again in another part of the apartment. But this time, there was something different. This time, they found it sat with some kind of liquid on its hands. Upon a closer look, they were even more frightened, because the liquid appeared to be blood. And this blood was all over the doll's hands, as well as 3 distinct dots of blood were also on its chest. Terrified, the three sat in the living room and tried to figure out some kind of game plan on how to handle the paranormal situation they found themselves in. Deirdre would grab a phone book from the cupboard and begin flicking through the pages as the group talked. One of her fingers would finally rest on a psychic medium's number. During the brief call, they would explain that they had been experiencing ghostly-type activity within their apartment, but they did not inform her about the doll specifically. She would arrive the following day to see what she could do to help. As she walked through the apartment, she began to explain to Lara and Deirdre about the spirit she felt had inhabited the building. The ladies would eventually make their way to Deirdre's room, where the doll currently sat. They asked what the medium felt in regards to the doll. Upon examining it, she said she felt a strong presence surrounding the object, but informed the two that she would need to conduct a seance around it in order to discover more information. So, a seance was agreed to. As the ritual was conducted around the doll, the medium began to divulge information to Lara and Deirdre. She claimed that she had channeled the spirit of a 7-year-old little girl named Annabelle Higgins. She said that Annabelle used to play in the area long before the houses and apartment buildings were there, back when all that existed were fields. Many innocent and happy hours were passed here until suddenly they ended. Annabelle was confused as to what had happened to her, to which the medium interpreted to be her death, and since her death, the child had wandered the place she was the happiest, the fields. Once the apartments were built upon them, the halls quickly became a lonely place for her to haunt. With the lifestyles of most modern people requiring work most of the time, this meant that Annabelle had no one to play with. But then, one day, two young women brought with them a playful-looking doll. Finally, she had something to play with again, and more so, she had the comfort of two young women who she believed would be more empathetic and accepting of her and would allow her to play with them. Through the vessel of the medium, Annabelle would ask if she could live in the doll and be with Deirdre and Lara. Touched by the young girl's story, the two women agreed, and following the seance, they would name the doll Annabelle in the young girl's honor, a truly nice gesture from the two of them. However, upon agreeing to have Annabelle inhabit the doll and stay with them, is when the haunting truly began. Convinced now that they were sharing a space with Annabelle, they began to treat the doll as a living, breathing person. It was no longer a lifeless toy, but the young and lonely little girl. Regardless of the two ladies' compassion, Cal was not so convinced. He sensed that something was very off in regards to this entire situation and believed that no good would come of it. He thought the doll could possibly be some kind of trickster or a conduit that disguised its true intentions, and in time, perhaps, he was right. In the weeks following the seance, Cal began to feel ill at most times of the day with no rational origin, and at night, every night, he began to have horrible nightmares. These experiences culminated with Cal waking up one night to find Annabelle gliding over his body. Before he could react, the doll's hands were on either side of his neck, strangling him, its large, void-like eyes staring into his, as it sought to steal his life. In a later interview, Cal would describe the event like this: "While I was lying there, I suddenly woke up, and something seemed wrong to me. I looked around the room, but nothing was out of place. But then I looked down towards my feet, and I saw the ragdoll Annabelle. It was slowly gliding up my body. It moved over my chest and stopped. Then it put its two arms out. One arm touched one side of my neck, and the other touched the other side, like it was making an electrical connection. Then I began to be strangled. I was writhing and trying to push the doll off my chest, but I might as well have been pushing on a wall, because it wouldn't move. As hard as he pushed against the doll, it would not budge, and just as he felt like he was slipping into unconsciousness, with every fiber of his being, he pushed back, and finally was able to throw the doll away from him. However, despite a terror-struck but relieved Cal, this would be far from the last time that Annabelle would seek to destroy. One night, when Deirdre was out of the apartment, Lara and Cal were spending time together in the living room. This relaxing time, however, was quickly interrupted with a large banging sound that emanated from Deirdre's room. The couple, confused as to what it could be, rushed to find the source. With Cal headed in first, they threw the door open, expecting to see someone. But to their surprise, they were only met with the icy gaze of Annabelle. She was staring at them from the floor, as if she had been tossed aside by someone. Cal walked over to the doll and went to pick it up, but suddenly, he dropped Annabelle and screamed in pain. The young man winced in agony as white-hot slashes lashed his chest. A small pool of blood began to form in the middle of his shirt as he frantically darted towards the door. Lara was paralyzed with fear, as her boyfriend had been attacked by something that neither of them could see. The two would run out of the room and back to the living room as possible, praying to God that this force wasn't pursuing them. When they reached the sofa, Lara pulled up Cal's blood-soaked shirt to find several large gashes on his chest that looked like claw marks. By now, it was becoming increasingly clear that Annabelle sought to harm them. Upon informing Deirdre of what had happened while she was gone, when she arrived back at the apartment, the three, unsure of what else to do, contacted a local priest for help. He would, in turn, request permission to help from his superiors, and his superiors then passed on the information to paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren. The Warrens were intrigued by what was allegedly taking place and decided to pursue the case in hopes of helping the young trio. Upon arriving at their apartment, hearing each person's testimonies and observing how the space felt, as well as the doll itself, the Warrens believed the happenings to be a result of a heavy demonic infestation. They believed that the demon didn't specifically haunt just their apartment, but rather the building itself and the land around it, that it had seen the doll as a way in. They further explained that the seance had essentially allowed the demon to communicate directly with them, to be invited into their lives. All of those who were present and taking place in the ritual were highly vulnerable spiritually, and this opened them up to manipulation from the demon, which spun a false narrative that it was instead the spirit of little, lonely Annabelle. Following the seance, Deirdre and Lara had paid credence to the doll instead of ignoring it, which only fed the demon more energy. It would then continue to feed off them by manipulating their caring and maternal emotions. Since the women were powerless to resist, feeling sorry for the little girl who just wanted to play and be cared for. But once the women had accepted the demon into their lives, they and everyone around them became fair game. The entity no longer had to masquerade itself. It was free to unleash its true form. The couple had sensed that the demon was a very powerful one, given how strong it had continued to grow and infest their lives, given its proclivity to violence. If left unchecked, it would have probably tried to kill one or all of them within the next several weeks. After explaining the seriousness of the situation they found themselves in, the Warrens then contacted a priest they frequently worked with on demonic cases, a man named Father Everett. And Father Everett agreed to come and bless the apartment in an attempt to weaken or drive out the demon entirely. In due time, he too would arrive and conduct the blessing. Once Father Everett was finished and had departed, the Warrens warned the group that if the blessing hadn't driven the demon out, that it at this time was severely weakened, but could potentially come back with a vengeance. Believing the doll to be a conduit, at Deirdre's request, the Warrens took Annabelle with them when they left. Deirdre, Lara, and Cal were now thankfully free of the demonic entity that had plagued their lives. However, Annabelle's story is far from over. The Warrens' problems seemed to begin as soon as Annabelle was stuffed into Ed's briefcase. As the couple was headed home, they began to experience engine issues in their vehicle, which almost resulted in multiple head-on collisions. The demonic entity was causing the power steering and brakes to fail, and even the engine to stall. Once they were able to finally get back home, the doll would be placed within the Warrens' office, specifically within Ed's chair. In the days to come, the Warrens would begin to witness the doll manifesting paranormal activity within their very house. The doll was seen levitating on several occasions and began to frequently teleport to different rooms, and the same little notes written with pencil on parchment paper began to appear with all too familiar phrases, such as, "Help me," and then "Now, help us." On top of this, one evening, while she was alone, Lorraine began to hear what she described as loud rolling growls that reverberated within the walls and throughout their entire house. Following this night, the Warrens would be visited by Father Daniel Mills, the Catholic priest the couple were also working with. Upon inquiring about their dealings with the doll, the priest made the mistake of picking up Annabelle and telling her that you were nothing but a rag doll, and you can't hurt anything. As the priest laughed, Ed warned him to never touch or say anything like that to the doll ever again. As he prepared to leave, Lorraine warned the priest to please drive carefully because her clairvoyance had revealed to her an impending tragedy involving a young priest. Appreciating her concern, but writing the situation off, Father Mills departed the Warrens' residence. A few hours later, he would be involved in a near-fatal car accident, which totaled his vehicle after his car's brakes had mysteriously failed. Upon receiving the news that the priest was hurt but would survive following the accident, the Warrens decided to lock Annabelle away in hopes that she would never be able to hurt anyone ever again. They would douse her in holy water and place her within a blessed glass case. A blessed crucifix would also be placed on the outside of the box, as well as a warning sign asking anyone who may come across the doll not to touch it. The doll was then placed in their occult item collection. Although Annabelle was now sealed away in hopes that she would no longer harm anyone, her power still seems to affect those who visit her. After Ed passed away, Lorraine, in several interviews, would refer to Annabelle as one of the most evil objects she had ever come into contact with. Besides numerous bouts of bad luck, some people have even said to have encountered death as a result of meeting her, as well as others losing their minds completely and ending up in psychiatric care for the rest of their earthly existence. One day, a young man visited the Warrens Museum and clearly did not think things through. He went up to and challenged the doll, wanting the worst of whatever it had to offer. He had apparently driven to the museum with his girlfriend on his motorcycle. Upon their departure, 3 hours into their trip home, the man would lose control of his vehicle and would hit a tree at a very high speed. He would die almost instantly due to the impact. His girlfriend, on the other hand, survived, but would remain hospitalized for over a year. Was this particular instance coincidence, or the demon inhabiting the doll inflicting exactly what it had to offer? Although the Warrens did explain how the demon came into the doll, it begs a bit of a deeper question, one that we've seen reoccurring multiple times over our various coverage of haunted objects. And that is, how much attention is too much attention or dedication when it comes to objects? Because it seems like depending on your spiritual state and location, that dedication or that imbuement could potentially open a door or create a vessel for something malicious to make its way in. I know that the Warrens are controversial figures, now even in death, but regardless, they are integral to many of the paranormal stories we have and will have covered in the future. But what do you think? Was Annabelle truly possessed? Was the whole case legitimate or a hoax? And with these questions, you may find yourself wondering, where is the Annabelle doll today? Annabelle remains sealed in the same box she was placed in 50 years ago. Ed and Lorraine's daughter, Judy Spira, and her husband, Tony, continue to hold the torch for the Warrens and their work. Annabelle is on display for all to see at the Occult Museum. And if you choose to visit, if you happen to find yourself staring into her big, dark eyes, just know that if you stare too long into the abyss just may stare back at you. I did also just want to announce here, and I will also be doing some separate promotional videos for something I've never done before, which is a meet and greet. So I will be a guest at the 2023 Tennessee Haunts and Legend Expo, which will take place on Saturday, October 21st at the Nashville Fairgrounds. There's going to be a ton of stuff to do and see, and lots of scary stories and legends to learn about. So if you'd like the opportunity to meet me, I will have a booth there. I'll have some shirts, some cards, and probably some other stuff. And I'd be happy to chat with you guys. I'll also be joined by my co-host Hayden from the Mystery Archives podcast. So come out, have a great time, and see how boring I actually am. Other than that, guys, I hope you're all having a great October, and I wish you nothing but the absolute best. As always, this has been Cody here at Mystery Archives. Remember to stay safe out there, and take care. I want to tell you a true account that starts in 1970, and it still gives me chills every time I remember it. My name is Deirdre Bernard. I was 25 years old, fresh out of moving boxes, and settling into my first apartment with two dear friends, Laura Clifton, who was training to be a nurse, and her fiancé, Randell. My mother sent me a birthday gift, a doll with rosy cheeks and matching red hair. I thought she was the sweetest thing and placed her on my bed, arms and legs spread out so she could greet me whenever I came home from my classes. That first week, I'd study, then spend a little time talking to that doll before putting her back in exactly the same position. But after a few days, I began to notice something strange. Every morning I left for school, the doll lay just where I had left her. Every night I returned, she had moved. Sometimes her legs were crossed. Most nights her arms were folded or pointed outward. Before long, I found her in corners of my room, on a chair, even in the living room. though I never put her there. One evening, Laura and Cal came home with me. We unlocked the door and found that doll kneeling in a chair, facing the front door as if she had been waiting for us. None of us dared to touch her right away. I knew I had placed her on my bed that morning. She simply could not have moved by herself, unless something unseen was lifting her. That same night, we tried to bend her back into that kneeling posture. No luck. Her joints would not hold the pose. The doll's attitude had us completely bewildered. We all felt it. Some force was playing with us. Days later, little scraps of parchment paper began showing up around the apartment. They were written in pencil and said things like, "Help us," or "Help Cal." We did not keep parchment or pencils in the house, and no crisis was happening. So what or who was asking for help? At first we thought a prankster had snuck in, so Laura and I marked the window frames and shifted the furniture. When we got home, every mark was intact, not a single chair moved, yet the doll sat in a different room. Then, one night, we found her with a reddish liquid on her little cloth hands, and 3 drops of the same substance on her chest. It looked like blood. We stared at one another, frozen, then flicked through a phone book and called a local psychic medium without telling her about the doll. She arrived the next day. The medium walked through our apartment, waved her hands, and said she felt a spirit drifting through the building. We led her to my room and showed her the doll. After a moment, she said, "I will hold a seance here tonight." That evening, around my bed, we chanted and lit candles. The medium spoke in a soft voice, as if channeling someone. She told us she had made contact with a little girl named Annabelle Higgins, aged 7, who used to play on these fields long before these apartments were built. In Annabelle's spirit world, she wandered those open fields until, by accident or illness, she died. When the builders came, she found herself alone in unfamiliar hallways. She longed for companionship. Then one day, she spotted our doll, and through the medium she told us, "Let me live inside that doll and play with you." Laura and I felt sorry for a lonely child. We named the rag doll Annabelle in her honor. We spoke to her. We cared for her. Kel did not. He felt we had opened the wrong door. He guessed we might be welcoming something darker than a child's ghost. Soon after the seance, Kel fell ill every day with no clear cause. At night, he began having terrible nightmares. One night, he jostled me awake in a panic, saying, "Deirdre, something is on my chest." I flicked on the light. Annabelle was gliding up his body, arms outstretched, her fabric hands pressing against his neck. He said she was choking him with an unholy strength. He shoved with every ounce of energy he had and finally hurled her off. Cal gasped for air, sweat soaking his shirt. A few nights later, when I was out, Laura and Cal heard a crash inside my room. They ran in and saw Annabelle on the floor. Cal reached down to pick her up and suddenly felt white-hot slashes across his chest. He dropped the doll and fell back in pain. Laura rushed to him and discovered long claw-like gashes in his skin. They ran out of the room, praying whatever attacked him had stayed behind. When I returned, shaken by their story, we called the local parish priest. He told his bishop. Then the bishop called paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren. The Warrens came with serious expressions. They said we were up against a powerful evil, not just a ghost of a little girl. According to them, our seance had let a demon slip through, posing as Annabelle. We had offered it a home in that doll, and it was feeding off our sympathy. Ed and Lorraine arranged for Father Everett, their go-to exorcism priest, to bless our whole apartment. He sprinkled holy water, recited prayers, and left us feeling both safer and terrified. The Warrens warned that the blessing had only weakened the demon. They took Annabelle home in a special case, locked with blessed crucifixes and a warning sign, "Do not touch." We were finally free of the terror, but the doll's evil followed the Warrens. On the drive back, their car lost power steering and brakes. They nearly crashed. At home, Annabelle levitated, changed rooms, and the little pencil notes reappeared on parchment paper. Lorraine heard low growls echoing through the walls. Father Daniel Mills, another priest, came over. Thinking he could taunt the spirit, he picked up the doll and laughed. "You are just a rag doll. You cannot hurt anyone." Ed warned him not to insult it. Lorraine begged him to drive carefully. She had seen danger in her visions. Hours later, his brakes mysteriously failed and he wrecked his car. He survived, but was shaken. Ed and Lorraine realized they had to seal Annabelle away for good. They placed her in a glass case, poured holy water over her, pinned a crucifix on top, and stored her among other occult items in their museum. Over the years, many who visited the case reported strange accidents or sudden illnesses. Some say people have gone mad after staring into her blank eyes. One young man rode his motorcycle with his girlfriend to challenge Annabelle. He taunted her through the glass. 3 hours into their trip home, his brakes failed on a curve. He crashed into a tree and died instantly. His girlfriend survived, but spent over a year in the hospital. Coincidence? Or the demon's final revenge? Today, Annabelle remains locked in that same box at the Warren Occult Museum, guarded by Judy Spira, Ed and Lorraine's daughter, and her husband Tony. If you ever stand before her and stare into those dark glass eyes, remember the warning. Gaze too long into the abyss, and the abyss just may gaze back at you. Before I close, I want to mention that I will be appearing at the 2023 Tennessee Haunts and Legend Expo on Saturday, October 21st, at the Nashville Fairgrounds. I will have a booth with shirts, cards, and other items. My co-host Hayden from the Mystery Archives podcast will join me. We would love to meet you, swap stories, and show you that life is more ordinary than these tales suggest. Thank you for listening to my account. I hope you stay safe, keep your own keepsakes in perspective, and remember, some things are best left alone.